All right, guys, this is going to be the video to be able to know how to draw a goldfish. Now, my whole point was showing you guys this, and I know I showed a lot of detail for the art ones because it was technically the video for the drawing 2 class on how to draw the eyes, which was the first video. But you don't necessarily have to incorporate too much of the shading, and I will go over with you guys when we start with the backgrounds, and I show you guys how to do those, either with watercolor or with color pencil, whichever you have available for yourself. You're going to see that the shading on these, I'm keeping as minimal as possible just because of the fact being that, this is an art 1 class and I wanted to show you more kind of like how to approach how to draw it. Can you make it more realistic? Yes. If you extend the shading, if you add more, if you do color blending and things like that later, you can make it look more realistic, but I'm going to try to simplify it. It's going to be more of a linear drawing with adding some shading to it. So that way you start learning how to process drawing objects by using shape and form, okay? So make sure you guys follow along. I'm gonna remind you really quick that if you wanna write down the steps on the side so that way you can draw it a second time without having to look at the video again, that is fine too. So if you just wanna write step 1 and then, of course, the first step will be to draw a circle. So just write, draw a circle, that sort of thing. You can follow those along later, okay? So like I said, first step is going to be to draw a circle. And because we're going to be drawing a goldfish, we're going to draw a couple of circles to create the body, not just one. Look at how light I kept it. I didn't go too dark because if I have to erase, it's not going to cause any kind of super dark line. And then it's going to end up coming out on the final when I start adding the shading. Okay, so right now I'm going to keep it as light as possible. So I'm drawing one circle here. That's the first step. Second step will be to draw a second circle that's gonna intersect slightly. So you'll notice the actual direction I put here. So I'm drawing a second circle right here, a little bit smaller, and it does intersect that first circle. This is gonna be the guide for where we have the head because they are shaped a little bit more oval shaped. But the reason why I broke it up into 2 is because this original circle, part of the circle over here is gonna help guide us when it comes to drawing the gills, the eyes, and that sort of thing. Okay, so this is why I instead of drawing one big oval shape, I drew 2 circles to begin with, okay? So now that I have that complete, I'm gonna go ahead and also draw the circle that's gonna be for the eye, which I'm actually going to place this in the center of these 2. So I'm drawing it slightly larger because if you've ever followed especially when you have like those big goldfish that are like angelfish and those kind of things, they almost look like their eyes are protruding from the sides of their face. So this is why this is more of like the area that comes out, not necessarily the center part of the eye, okay? Now it's gonna look a little funny, I already know on this one, but I'll draw an additional shape for the eye. It's gonna look almost like a weird little robot almost, but I am gonna draw another circle. And the reason why I'm drawing it right here is because it's going to be just our guide for the outside part. Notice that my original shape of the circle is right here and it comes out just slightly from the side because this is on the opposite side of my fish. So this is why I'm drawing it here because I'm only going to see a little bit of it come out over here. Okay, try to make it the same height. I think mine dropped just slightly. So if I want to make it just a little bit bigger on this side, that's fine. We just want to make sure that these are more or less at the same height. So now at this point, I'm also going to draw the circle for the mouth. Again, it's going to look a little bit funny, but I'm just going to go ahead and draw it a little bit more off to the side over here. I'm not going to make it right dead set in the middle because I have a lot of kids who want to draw it here in between the eyes, but remember that this eye is on the other side of the head. So that's why my actual oval shape for the mouth is going to be placed more on this side. Notice it comes out slightly from this particular circle. And I'm keeping it as light as possible because things will be getting erased at this point once I start adding some of the major lines, okay? So before I start with adding the circles and oval shapes for the fins and for the tail, I'm gonna start defining some of the shape. So I'm gonna start off with the top part of my fish. What I wanna do is start somewhere about like right here from the circle, not up here on top, but more over here off to the side. Still towards the top, but over here off to the left-hand side, if you're looking at it. So what I'm going to end up doing, right for you, left for me, I'm going to go ahead and start applying a little circle shape that goes this way. So just a tiny curve. And then I'm gonna follow the top part of the circle, the one that I'm happy with. Now, if you've ever paid attention to goldfish, they have kind of like a straight effect, almost kind of like a linear effect that comes down towards the face. So because I'm coming in this direction, I'm not gonna follow the original circle. I'm actually gonna keep this slightly flat, but while it still curves in a downward motion. Now I'm gonna stop right here where I get close to this particular eye because it's not necessarily connected, it protrudes out. So what I'm gonna end up doing is I'm going to take this line to the part of the circle that I'm comfortable with to define that eye. I'm gonna bring it around this way, and then I'm going to bring it flat to come this way towards the mouth area, okay? So if yours is a little bit smaller of a shape, that's fine. Like if you don't want it to pop out so much, but I mean, most of these little angel fishes, especially where they have those big bulging eyeballs that look like these bubbles that are connected to their face, you know, they will be a little bit larger. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep it kind of more or less a normal distance. So I'm gonna start defining this eye over here already, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to pay attention to the line because I'm not gonna make a whole entire circle that goes all the way around. This is kind of like a, it's called a broken line where you don't connect all the way, but it gives the illusion. And when we add the shading, of course, it'll come out a little bit better. But right now I'm just concentrating on the outline. So I'm gonna draw the line here, stop, move a little bit on this side. So I'm gonna leave a space in between to start drawing this part of the circle, stop, have a little break in the line. So there's a space in between. And this kind of gives the illusion that it is tightly connected over here while not being like a hole, like if it would be an actual eyelid and so forth. It just comes up slightly, okay? And maybe even a small little line right there. So I'm not connecting the line all the way around. I'm leaving spaces in between. I'm also going to draw the circles that are going to be the actual eye because this is the part that actually bulges out with that little bubble effect. I'm going to draw another circle over here that's going to start being the actual eye. I'm going to draw another circle here and then a small little highlight, just like we did with the actual eye for the human eye. And I'm going to draw this circle more prominent. So I'm going to go ahead and define it as well as this one, not my highlight because it's a highlight. I am going to shade this so that way it kind of starts to resemble the eye of the fish at this point. So the next step I'm going to do on this is I'm going to create the actual side of the face over here that is going to be more of the shape of the gill. So I'm going to start off by drawing away. So you could either connect, because I've had some, and I've seen other images, but I draw it different every year. They both work. I'm going to do a double line this time. So I'm actually going to take this just a little bit beyond that original circle. And then this one, I'm going to kind of have it like if it were connecting to the eye slightly. So I'm kind of changing the shape just a bit, and I'm going to bring it down this way, because it's going to be a couple of gills that I'm going to actually create. I'm going to stop that one there, and I'm actually going to use this one to come here and connect to the bottom. And I'm going to stop right here as I get to the bottom, because I'm going to start doing the shape of the mouth first before I continue with the rest of it, okay? So on the mouth, usually fish are very animated. They're very cartoony looking. So I am going to, because again, this is an Art 1 class, and we're not necessarily going for full-blown realism right now. We're just trying to get a more or less basic shape. So when you look at it, you're like, yep, that's a goldfish. If you want to be more realistic, can you get a reference picture of an actual goldfish and follow that? Yeah, you can. So that's going to be up to you of how realistic you want to draw this. If you just want to follow along with the way that I draw it, great. And if you want to get more realistic, you can find a reference as you do your final. But at this point, I am going to change the shape slightly. I'm going to use this as the top of my mouth. And remember that this is the middle of the fish, which means this is where the top of the mouth is going to be more or less. And then I'm using this as a guide. So I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to create the shape where it goes curved in the opposite direction. Same thing for this side. I am going to go a little bit beyond this particular shape where it connects, because like I said, the fish goes all the way to the other side, and we're trying to give it the illusion that it is from both sides and a little bit 3D, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to draw this as a double lip. I'm gonna draw just a little bit lower and they connect over here on the sides. And then the bottom of the mouth, for those of you guys that ever go fishing with your dad or mom, or if you're just one of those that fish on your own and you've ever hooked a fish, you'll notice that the top lip, when they open their mouth, they tend to follow the same shape. So I'm gonna go with this same shape here to connect down this way and to connect this direction. So it kind of resembles that same shape. And then I'll do a double lip by coming down and doing the same thing over here and coming this way. Like I said, can this be more realistic? Yes, by doing more shading rather than line work, but we're trying to keep this slightly simple because it is an Art 1 class and we're just trying to get a basic shape for some of these. As I incorporate the shading, it will look a little bit more realistic, okay? So also in the inside, we should see if you've ever opened up a fish because you took out the hook, you notice that the gills, you can see it from the inside. So I'm just gonna draw a couple of lines going in a little curved motion. I'm gonna put 3 on this side, that's fine if you just wanna add 2. If you wanna add another one, I'm gonna pretend that where I put the actual fin, like if there's another gill on the back side. So I'll leave it like that with 3 and 2 on this side. But if you wanna add an additional, like a little bit of a line, you can. So at this point, I'm gonna start already with the circles that are going to define my fins. So on this side, I'm actually gonna just attach it here, not over here towards the back, because I do wanna create more space in the front. And the way that I'm gonna be drawing the back, it's just gonna look a little bit more 3D if I attempt it this way. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna draw an oval shape coming here to the side of the body. They usually tend to have very, very, the fins are very, very flappy as far as the ones that are more like angelfish. And they tend to kind of, when they're swimming, they create a lot of movement. So just to kind of get that particular effect, I'm just going to, like I said, this is on the opposite side. So if I'm kind of debating where this is, it should be somewhere about like right here for the attachment. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create another one that where it kind of intersects this direction. But they do create a lot of movement. So I'm trying to get it to where it'll kind of look like it's on the side of the body over there, okay? I am going to go ahead and also close this up already. So I'm just gonna bring this, curve this up and just bring it over here to this part of the mouth, kind of like where it looks like it's gonna connect to the back over here. And then if I do the shape of the actual fin, I'm gonna start off by connecting it here so at least it goes somewhere. I'm gonna bring it out this way to this part of the fin. I am going to create it's still curved, but slightly at a point. And then I'm gonna use this part to kind of come and kind of just bring it around. So I'm doing kind of like these little waves and then just connecting it back this way. And I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. Remember that you kind of want to just take your pencil this way. So I should be a little bit lower. So if I want to fix that shape, I can, but just as a guide, so that way it kind of looks the same. Come across, I'm going to point it out right there. And then I'll do the same technique where I'm just going to kind of do a couple of swirls and then come over here to the back. So some of these this is just going to create more movement. Now, sometimes you'll see multiple, even though that they have the fins, depending on the goldfish, sometimes they have double the fins. So I'm going to add it just because for me, I think it creates more movement. Do you have to do this next step? No. So if you don't like the way it looks on mine and you don't want to add that double fin, you don't have to. Like I said, I'm putting it because depending on which goldfish you're drawing, some of them do have multiple fins to be able to kind of move around because of the way that their body is connected and so forth and how bubbly they are. So it really depends on which goldfish you're drawing, but I'm going to go ahead and add a second fin just because I like the way it looks too, because it almost creates that movement of as they were swimming. So I'm going to add it. You don't have to add the second one. If you like the way it looks with just one, because you're like, nah, that's a little bit more realistic, then leave it like that. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create the curve over here because the tail gets a lot skinnier over here. So I'm going to create this little flap that goes this direction. Then it comes across here and I want it to end somewhere. So I'm just going to come over here to pretend so I'm just pretending I'm going right here. And then this is going to come this way and connect over here down to the bottom. can't just stop there because it has to go somewhere. So I just need to make sure that it has the illusion. Now, if you originally drew this shape, and let's just say it was a little bit more over here and it stops here and you don't see it, then don't draw anything on the bottom. But if your original shape that you did, it has to go somewhere. Don't just end it there and then there's nothing down here. So you got to connect it somewhere. I'm going to do another shape up here because they do have a fin up on top. So I'm going to do almost like if it were an egg shape, you know, because I want to get that little egg shape look. So it's a little bit higher up on the top over here. And notice that it does intersect that original circle when we did it. Then to get this kind of shape going on, what I'm going to do is I have to connect it somehow. So I'm going to go in this direction first. I'm going to go up here. Then I'm going to go ahead and make that little point and come down and then just do a couple of those same little hoops and then just curve it this direction. So that way it's going to go connected over there towards the tail. Now, are there more fins down here on the bottom? Yes, they should have a fin. Like if you want to kind of draw like a ghost where you kind of see like a little bit come from the bottom, that's fine. I think for me, it's too much. Like I can always say that it's being hidden behind this, but if you wanted to draw another one, like you just draw the circle where you think that fin would be, and then you can kind of draw the remnants of them. I'm not going to draw it on mine because I think it's going to be too much already going on how I did the double fin. If you only did one, and especially if you angled them down a little bit and you have that space, then, you know, you can always look up a picture of a goldfish, and then you can kind of add that little fin that usually falls over here to the back. But like I said, for me, it's going to be too much going on. So I'm going to leave mine like that. If yours follows this particular look, then you can leave it like that as well. Okay, I'm going to zoom out just slightly because I'm going to do the back tail, and I want to be able to make sure that I have enough space to show you guys on how to do that. So for the tail, I'm going to do more circles, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start off by doing the big one that comes out here. So I'm going to draw, and you guys should too, a very light egg shape that goes up like this in this direction. I'm going to draw another one that goes in this direction with a point more, like if I'm looking at it as an egg shape, the point more is going to be over here. And then I'm going to do an additional oval shape over here, and then an additional oval shape over here. If you've ever noticed goldfish, especially like angelfish, they tend to, like some will have that double fin in the back for the tail. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm drawing those. If you don't want to add it, let's say you draw the first one and you're like, no, I like the way that looks like that, and you don't want to add that second flap towards the back, then don't add it, okay? But this is just showing you of how I would draw it if I was drawing a goldfish. Now at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do the line for the contour that attaches it. So what I'll do is I'm gonna bring this so that way it looks a little bit more organic. I'm gonna follow this part of the shape, even though it's a little bit higher, just so that way it looks like it's attaching properly to the tail down here. I'm gonna bring it up to the top. I'm going to create a little flap like that, the little point. I'm going to bring it down with a couple of hoops. Now, right here, this is going to be one solid tail fin over here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring it like that. And then this one's going to have a point as well. And this is my original line for that first one. So I want to not get confused on which one I'm using for that original tail there. And if you feel like, no, that's way too out, then make it smaller. That's fine. You know, I'm just drawing it just to draw it. But if you want to change your shape, like if you're like, no, this is too similar, I want it smaller, then draw it smaller over here if you want, and then attach it like that. So I can do that as well if you feel like, because usually goldfishes, they tend to have them a lot longer on the top than they do on the bottom. So if that makes you feel better, do it. But this is the time to kind of go and make your changes if you're going to make any changes. My original circle I had here is fine, so I'll leave that placement there. I'm going to go ahead and follow the shape also here. So I did a little point, and then I'm going to follow this to bring over here and connect. And then I'm just going to make sure that it kind of goes like that so that it connects down somewhere. It's got to go somewhere, so just make sure it connects. On mine, I'm looking at it, and this kind of looks a little flat. I do want a little bit more round for me, just for the sake of it looking a specific way. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to change that shape right now while I still have the opportunity to do so before I start my shading. And then I'm going to erase that line. So if you don't like the way that your lines are moving or whatever the case is on yours, this is the time to go back and make some of those changes. Like, no, I want this one a little bit more pointy. Okay, well then change it before you start your shading, because once you start your shading, it's going to be more difficult to make those changes. And then the same thing that I did down here on the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do here on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring this up to a point. I'm not going to go as far up just because I think that's a better, distance. I like this line, so I'm following the opposite line here, and then I'm just going to bring it and then attach it. Usually on the attachments, you want to try to curve opposite. So make sure that it at least has a little bit of a curve like that. And that's what's going to make it look a little bit more organic. So at this time, if you want to erase any lines, go for it. If you made them light enough, you don't have to erase these, because when you start your shading, and we're going to be doing minimal shading, take that into consideration, because when we do the background, I'm going to show you guys how it looks. And this is the whole purpose of showing you this project, is so you can do things a little bit faster, in a faster way of rather than having to do the whole entire thing with a bunch of shading, a bunch of stuff, and you can get stuff done. Like if you have, let's just say, an English class, and they will require you to draw something in particular. I'm showing you these particular techniques for this assignment, so that way oh, wow, Ms. Palmena showed me how to do, the watercolor backgrounds or the color pencil backgrounds real quick, to be able to add a drawing on top of it, where you do more line work and then you add minimal shading and it still looks like 100% complete, okay? So this is just a faster way of getting something done when you start from start to finish, okay? So at this point, I am going to erase anything on the outside for sure, because that's not going to be able to get covered with shading. So I will go, and this is why we do leave our lines as light as possible. So that way the stuff that falls in the inside should get covered with shading. But if you want to erase them, just because you're like, nah, I don't want the lines to bother me when I'm starting with the shading, then go ahead and erase them. If you feel it's going to get in your way. I'm not going to erase them all. I'm just going to erase what I think will get in the way of what I'm going to want to leave a little bit lighter. Like, see all this right here, I'm for sure going to erase, because this is going to be the highlight of my fish, which is the top. So for sure, I do want to erase this part. The rest will probably get covered, so I'm not going to bother. But anything that falls on the outside of the fish, like anything that's here, you should erase. So that's good for me. If I get up close, you can see that there's still little lines in there. That's okay, because like I said, we're going to start the shading at this point. Let me double check that it is focused 100% before we continue, just because, it's going to get covered. So at this point, I'm going to first do the lines for the fins before I start the shading, so that way I won't have to go back on that. And for that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to start off wherever the narrow part of my fin is. And I'm going to just try to mimic the shape on the top of this one. And I'm just going to bring it and lift my pencil as I get to the side, so that way it creates a little point at the end of that line. Okay, so I'm going to take it here and I'm just going to bring out. Notice that there's more space towards the outside. They're more narrow towards the inside of the fin. So I'm making them with a little bit more space towards the outside, so that way it fills the space as I'm coming across this way. They just get more narrow. Okay, and I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. If I feel like I didn't take it long enough, like these could have been stretched a little bit more, then I'm going to go ahead and just stretch them. But remember to lift your pencil if that happened to you. Okay, I'll do the same thing for the opposite side. So I'm just going to go. I still have to give the illusion that it's coming from over here. So I still have to get a little bit more narrow on this side versus as it goes outside this way. So I'm just going to take them like that. And then I would see the lines on this, but it's not necessarily see-through. Can you give it the illusion of having it a little bit see-through? Yes, but I would do that more with the colored pencil versus the actual outline of this. So I'm only going to bring this line going here and just coming out towards the outside. So I'll just draw a few lines going like that. And then the same thing on this one. Now, when we're done with this on the final, guys, I am going to show you guys a technique. A lot of this has to do with more of the when it comes to Chinese printmaking. or drawing just with the brush drawings that they do, they have a lot of linear areas, even though it's got shading and it's got watercolor and stuff to fill in color. A lot of their outside of the stuff that they draw tends to have a little bit more of a black outline. So when we get closer to the finishing touches, I'll show you how to do that same technique, but using just a ballpoint pen and showing you where are the most important parts for each of the things that I'm showing you how to draw on where you can do those outlines, okay? So I'll do the same thing to this. I'm going to concentrate on this top line here for my shape of how I'm going to take it. So I'm going to go like this and bring it up, curve it, bring it up, curve it, bring it up, curve it, bring it up. And I'll just continue all the way, of course, getting smaller as it goes to the outside. Notice I'm trying my best to still keep that same technique of it being more narrow towards here, and as they go out they have a little bit more space versus the space here. So I'm just trying my best to keep it, if they don't follow exactly the same amount of space in between, it's okay. You know, this again, I'm trying to make this a little bit more simple. We're not trying to go too realistic because this isn't a drawing class, it's art one. I'm just showing you guys how to approach starting to draw things while using shape, okay? So for the actual tail on the back, it's the same thing. Now, this is a lot more narrow of a space versus this compared to this. So be very careful as you're drawing these to make sure that you do get a little bit wider towards the back side, because if not, you're not going to have enough of those lines to fit. So what I would do is I would start on the top, and then right here, while I'm starting to get closer to the middle, I would actually stop there and do it to the bottom part. So I'm going to actually start here and then come this way and just make sure that I get more space. So that way, see here, I've already run out of space. And that's why I want to do like 3 lines and 3 lines, because if I have to accommodate and start like from here, then it'll still look good at the end. So I can draw another line right here, and then I'm just going to work my way towards the middle by doing this. Now, if you can fit all of the lines by going from this original spot, great. But if you can't, this is a technique so that way you can make sure that it still looks good at the very end and it still has the illusion of the lines going that way, okay? I'll only put a couple over here, so I'm just going to put like, let's say 1 here. I think only 1 fits comfortably there. This line kind of messed up, so let me fix it before I move on. And then I'll do the same thing over here. I'll go ahead and I'll draw 1 line, because for sure 1 line fits. Leave a little bit of space. I'll start right here. I can put a second one, and probably only 2 fit comfortably there. I could put a third one, but that's kind of pushing it. It's a little squeezed of a space there, so I'm going to leave it like that. So now that I have the basic shape, I have more or less the lines where I want them. I am going to show you guys a technique on how to do the scales while not having to draw every single scale. And you just have to do a little bit, and it'll still look good. And it's a way of transitioning textures. So that way you can still accommodate some of that realistic quality while not having to draw every single thing. But I'm going to do that after I've done the shading. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start the shading. I am going to sharpen my pencil a little bit. You don't have to. Usually with the shading, you don't want a very sharp pencil. However, because I'm going to start in this little tiny tight space, that's why I sharpened it, okay? So at this point, what I'm going to end up doing is using the shading underneath the mouth. So like if it's in the inside, remember when we originally did the eye, how we went dark to light to make it look like the flap of skin is on the inside of the, or like on the top of the eyeball. This, I want to make sure that I want to make it look like it's in the inside casting a shadow. Now, the reason why I'm extending it a lot more than I did with the eye is because if it's sitting right on top of it, it's a quick, fast shadow and it should come up very quickly. This isn't. It's an opened entire mouth, so I am going to go dark to light towards the bottom. I should have a little bit also from the bottom in, but just a tiny bit, because there's more light. Remember how I explained on the eye that sits there. Now, these original lines that I did here, I am going to go dark to light this way so they at least cast some kind of a shadow, and it defines the line. So dark to light from each one going in the opposite direction. Dark to light from here going inward. And then I'm going to cast a deeper shadow over here towards the inside, coming out this way. So that way it looks like it's going inside. Also on the lip itself, I'm gonna just add a little tiny bit. Remember when we talked about things that, you know, curve, it should have a little bit of a shadow on the bottom. So I'm gonna put a gray that goes from gray to white towards the top. If my line originally for this upper lip was not cleaned up, I'll do so right now at this time. Now, I don't ever recommend doing a line for a contour like the way this one is, because it will look cartoony. However, because we're going to be applying, like I said, this on top of a colored background, it's not gonna look super strong. And I am gonna eventually show you guys the effect of doing some black lining if you choose, to make it look a little bit more like a Japanese print, in other words, or a Chinese brush drawing. Okay, so we'll create that illusion towards the very end. So it's okay if I leave my line like that. So at this point, I do want to also do the same kind of gray on the bottom of the lip here, going up. I don't want to lose this original line, so I'm going to darken it a little bit, but I'm actually going to take that shadow downward. So I'm going to start creating the shadow on my fish. I'm not going on the fin yet. Right now, I'm just concentrating on the shading of the fish here on the body. So I'm going to create that shadow, come a little bit. It gets a little bit lighter because it's coming towards the side of the face and there's more light hitting it. The bottom is casting a shadow, which is why it should be a little bit darker. And I'm just going to take the same gray. Now, you guys need to try your best to keep your shading as smooth as possible with the circular motion. I'm going to go a little bit fast on this, so that way the video isn't as long, but you guys make sure that you take your time, especially on the final. If you're going fast on the practice, it's fine. You know, like if it's not perfectly 100% smooth, but I understand that you see where the grays are supposed to be placed. You know, that's fine if you want to do that. Just make sure that on the final, you, like I said, try to make it as smooth as you can, because that transition, the practice of transition, guys, is going to help you with the other classes that you take in art. Okay, so I am going to, because this part is going to be very similar to the eye, the way that the actual flap of skin, excuse me, sits on the eyeball itself, because it does cast a very deep shadow. So I'm going to turn my paper just because it's a little bit easier for me to shade in this direction. I'm going to make sure that this line is dark, and then I'm going to go dark to light very quickly coming up, just like I did with the eyelid to the eyeball itself. So I'm just going to lift it, and then I'll get to that gray that's supposed to be the gray of the fish. So put dark and then pick it up very quickly, so that way it matches that other gray that's supposed to be for the rest of the fish. And then I'm going to go ahead, and since this is all behind here from the fins, I will go ahead and do this dark. And I'm going to just pick it up to the transition this way, okay, to cast a shadow. Now, if we think about it, the actual fish itself is a sphere. It's round, you know, it's a body, so it kind of plumps up. So I do need to make sure that I have a type of gray, not too dark, not too light. If we're trying to make this as a goldfish, you know, they're a little bit lighter in color. So I don't want to go super dark when it comes to the shading over here. You know, they're not white like the eyeball either in the eye that we were drawing. So we're not going to do it super light gray the way we did it like that and leave it white. Unless, of course, you are happy with your background color and you want that to be the majority of the fish color, that's fine. You can do that and keep it more minimal than what I'm doing. But I'm just trying to create more body at this point. I wanted to have some type of weight to it. I want it to look a little bit realistic while not having to do a lot of work. So I'm going to just go dark to light up. And then I'm going to add a little bit darker of a gray right here towards the bottom, kind of like what I did, like this gray that you see here. And just make sure that that transitions to this gray. So I'm going to go ahead and just start picking up the transition. Now the fin is behind. This is behind the fin. So because the fin is right in front, it should cast a little bit of a shadow. And I'm just going to pick up this gray this direction. Circular motion, so it comes out as smooth as possible. I am going to add a little bit of transition the way I did here, dark to light. Same thing right here on this part. So just pick it up very quickly. And then I'm just going to try my best to make sure that this gray comes somewhere about like right here where this particular fin is. So I'm going to stretch this gray a little bit. If you keep this very light as you guys are doing the background for your final, you're gonna notice that some of that color is gonna come through, and it's just gonna make it look like, especially if you decide to do the fish for your final, it's gonna look like it's a part of that particular watercolor that you chose. Can watercolor, when you guys are doing the watercolor, let's say you only have green, or let's say you only have a red available for your background color, can it still look like it's underwater? Yes, because remember that sometimes like when the sun sets or when it's a sunrise, that water looks like a different color. It doesn't necessarily have to be blue water. It can be those other colors and still look very 3D. So you can still make it look like it's a part. So if some of the red is coming through here, it'll look like it's more under the water. So I want this to be the highlight of the fish. So I want to make sure that this particular gray kind of does something like this. So I'm just going to put this as a guide very lightly. And then just try to my best again to blend this so it all looks like one gray. And then this is the gray that's going to quickly pick up transition, and I'm going to leave that as white, the very top of my fish. So that's going to give the illusion that it's going upward. The side of this eye, we want it to look like it's bulging out. So I'm actually going to cast a shadow down here on this side and then on the bottom. And then it gets lighter gray as it comes towards the top and right here. So if I need to push that a little bit deeper, I can. Now, because my light is coming from this direction, that's my go-to, you know, just on that side in general, I do want to make sure that this also has a little bit of a shadow. So I'm actually going to put a little bit darker of a gray right here, right underneath the eye part, this part right here. And I'm going to stretch this dark to light towards this gray, just so that, like I said, it gives the illusion that it's coming out from the side of the face. And I'm just going to bring this gray over here. So on this side, just so you know the shading on this, we do need to have a little bit of gray that goes like this, because like I said, we want to make it look like it's the side part of the eye. So I'm going to put a little bit of a gray going down here to transition up to this white. Again, if you take it too far, just a little bit of tapping with the eraser just to get that backwards transition. And then I'm just going to extend a little bit of gray going up this way and a little bit of gray. I had already done it on this side. And all this does is just make that side of the eye look like it's bulging out to the opposite side with not seeing any detail as far as the eyeball and all that, because you don't see it, it's on the other side, okay? I got maybe just a little too dark on this gray, so I'll just tap it slightly. And if that's the case on yours, just tap it until you get to the gray that you're looking for, okay? So now to do the fins, the shading, remember, something that sits on top of something is going to cast a shadow. So what I'll end up doing is on this part, I'm going to go dark to light in this direction and pick it up very quickly. You know, if you're adding this to a background already, like an existing background that has color, which I'll show you some examples when we come back next week, after I show you how to do the drawing. If you have like a little bit of just some shadows, and then this is behind the body, so I do want to cast that shadow just a little bit deeper. But if I leave a lot of white on this, it's just going to look like the color of my background. Like I said, it's going to give the illusion that that fish is actually under the water with it, okay? So I will go ahead and add a little bit of shadow over here towards the back as well, behind it, because it's behind it. So I'm going to go dark to light, but I'm not going to extend this all the way. I'm only going to come to about right here and pick it up to white, because if I was doing this, like I said, on a watercolor background, and I wanted my fish, especially this is what I do like, is to make it look like it's swimming underwater, then I want some of that background color to come out. So I'm just going to add a little bit of shading here, and then of course right here is going to cast the deepest part of the shadow. So on the opposite side, same thing. This is going to be, and I'm going to do the bottom fin first so I don't get lost here. So I'm just going to add a little bit of shadow here, dark to light. Right here, dark to light. Circular motion so it comes out as smooth as possible. right here, I'm gonna go ahead and do dark to light. Same thing right here. Make sure that this part right here is the part that I don't want it to get confused with that top fin. So I'm gonna go ahead and just extend that shadow just a little bit more. That way, when I do the shadow here on this part, and again, I'm moving my paper because it's more comfortable just for me to move this direction. I can go ahead and make sure that this line is nice and sharp and then go dark to light. I'm not gonna extend it too far on this top fin, just like I did with this one. I didn't take it all the way. So I'm only going to, as long as I can transition this to white, then that's fine. You know, I don't have to go anything beyond that. So since I was able to transition it at least up to there, I mean, it can still be a little bit smoother, but it's just doing that circular motion right on top. So once I have that already in place, then I'm going to do the top. Now for this one, I do want to go right on the body. I'm going to go dark to light towards the top on all of it. Same thing over here. So this is the top part of the fin, so dark to light towards the top. And now that I have that for the back fins, it's pretty much the same thing as far as I'm going to go ahead and darken the outside first. So the ones that fall on the bottom, just so that way they don't get confused when I start with the shading on that big fin. So I'm just gonna go dark to light towards the outer area. If I lose the lines on these, like on any of them, you can always go back and just darken those lines slightly. So it's not a big deal if you end up with the same gray, just go back and push on that line just a little bit darker, so that way it shows. Okay. Put a little bit more gray here. And then I'll do the same thing to the top. I'm just gonna go dark to light towards the outside. If you use the side of your pencil and you guys are doing that circular motion, your shading will come out smooth. Okay, I lost the line here, so I'll go back and just darken that line a little bit. Same thing right here. I lost the line, so darken the line a little bit. And then the shading for this part, I'm gonna be very minimal like this too. So I'm gonna just take this same gray and I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure that it transitions. I'm gonna turn it this way because it's more comfortable for me. So I'm just gonna make sure that it transitions towards the middle area, towards the outside part. And just as long as it transitions to white, you can keep this one very minimal. You don't have to add a lot of gray on this top one. As long as you make sure that it transitions as smooth as possible to the white, that's as far as you need to go with this. Now, at this point, like I said, I was going to talk about the scales. This is what's really going to anchor the fish and make it look like it's, you know, like more 3D than what we really did as far as the drawing portion for this. So what you're going to want to do is you want to follow this shape of the fish. So this original circle that we did that was here, we kind of have to, you know, picture it. We're going to start on the back side of this. So if you pay attention to the first stroke, for those of you guys that have ever gone fishing and know what scale shape, the shape of the scales are, they're somewhat like that kind of triangle, but where they're a little bit rounded. So I'm going to try my best to follow that shape, the original shape. I'm going to leave a little bit of space in between because I don't want to draw a lot of detail. So I'm just going to work my way, maybe draw about 5 of them at the most, like that. Okay. And then this is my guide. So I'm going to work my way back. If you've ever paid attention to scales before, they fall right in between, but I'm not gonna connect the line to the line. I'm gonna leave a little bit of space in between them. And what I'm gonna end up doing is continue that pattern, maybe not even beyond that. So in this one, I only have 4. That way, when I come to the next one, I'm gonna leave even more space in between. Notice how it's just a little tiny bump. Now this one's gonna go outside. So I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of this one. And then the next one's only gonna have 4 because I'm following in between, but they're gonna be even smaller. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you always wanna fall right in between. This one's right in between, so I'm gonna make this one even smaller. And this is a way of transitioning patterns. So you don't have to draw every single little tiny scale. You can make it look like it's fading away and you barely see any of that detail, okay? It's disappearing into the back. So I'm gonna do the same thing to the front. I'm actually going to put a couple of them, but smaller. So the one that falls in between this one will be smaller. I'm only gonna go up to there with the 4. And then if I feel, well, I can add one right here, you can put a tiny little scale if you want to, if you can fit it, okay? But it's basically a look just to where you can see that it has some kind of detail with not having to draw every single one on every single spot. And if you want to take it out a little bit further, you can, but it's not necessary at this point, okay? So now that I have this particular thing, now if I wanted to add anything else, I was explaining to the other class that you can even add like little circles on this on your final to make it look like maybe there's bubbles and it's the movement of bubbles and so forth. If you are going to do bubbles, you do need to look up because they do have some kind of shading where the actual shadow would be casted, and then, you know, highlights. If you have a white, you can always add a white with color pencil and so forth if you want to add one. Whatever you decide to do, the shadows on the bubbles have to be the same on each and every one. So wherever I put the shadow on this, I do need to make sure that I cast this. Do you have to have this on your final? No, I'm just giving you guys options. I had some kids where they wanted to do like seaweed, you know, like they wanted to incorporate some seaweed on the bottom or some shells and things like that, just because this is the one they knew that they were going to want to draw for their final. You know, that'll be up to you if you guys want to add anything extra. I'm only going to require, depending of course on the size that you draw, that you guys end up doing at least 2. Some were only able to do 1 because they did them very large. But these are just some examples as far as for how to approach drawing something while using your shape and form, breaking it up into shape. So it was the circle, we did the circles for the eyes, the oval shape. And most things that are organic, like in nature, are gonna be broken up into circle shape. Not everything, but the majority of stuff because they are organic, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and stop the video there.